In the heart of ancient Rome, where the city's pulse could be heard in the noise of the streets, a young teenager named Gaius was about to turn 15. This was a significant moment in his life, as he was entering adulthood. Gaius had spent his childhood in the quiet corners of the city, far away from the chaos of the Roman marketplace. His family lived in a modest house made of stone, a small but comfortable home in a busy district. Though Gaius's father, Marcus, was a successful merchant, Gaius didn't feel destined to follow his father's path. The streets were filled with merchants shouting prices, gladiators practicing their swordplay, and philosophers discussing life's deepest questions. But Gaius, unlike his father, was not interested in selling goods. Instead, he had dreams of becoming someone important, someone who would stand out in a city where strength, wisdom, and influence ruled. Gaius's father had always been proud of his work. He expected Gaius to take over the family business once he was older. But Gaius's heart was not in the trade of goods. He longed for adventure, for something grander than selling olive oil and wine. He wanted to be remembered, not as a merchant, but as someone who shaped the future of Rome. One day, as Gaius was walking through the marketplace, a messenger approached him. The messenger handed him a scroll sealed with the emperor's emblem. The emperor himself had invited him to attend a grand event at the palace. This was a rare opportunity, one that many young men would dream of. Gaius's heart raced as he unsealed the scroll and read the invitation. The emperor's event was more than just a celebration, it was a chance for young men to prove their worth. Gaius had always felt like he was destined for something greater, but he had never expected the emperor's attention. His mind raced with thoughts of what this could mean. Could this be the beginning of his rise to greatness? But as Gaius made his way home, he could not shake off the feeling that something was wrong. The streets of Rome were bustling as usual, but there was a strange tension in the air. As he passed a dark alleyway, a shadowed figure stepped out in front of him, blocking his path. The figure spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper, "You have been chosen, Gaius. But be careful, for danger lurks where you least expect it. The emperor's court is not what it seems. There is a conspiracy brewing, and you may find yourself caught in its web." Gaius stepped back, his heart pounding. The figure's eyes were dark, and his face was hidden beneath a cloak. Before Gaius could respond, the man disappeared into the shadows. Gaius stood frozen for a moment, his mind reeling with the warning. Was it true? Was there a plot against the emperor? The invitation to the palace was still in his hand. This could be the chance Gaius had been waiting for, but it also came with an unexpected cost. If there was indeed a conspiracy, would Gaius be caught in it? Could he prove himself to the emperor and rise above the dangers that lurked in the shadows? Gaius's thoughts swirled. He had always dreamed of something greater, but now, the choice was more complicated. Should he go to the palace and take his chance, or should he listen to the mysterious warning and stay away from the court? His heart told him to go, to accept the invitation and face whatever challenges awaited him. The opportunity to prove himself was too important. But the shadows of doubt followed him as he made his decision. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he fall into the traps laid out for him by those with darker motives? As Gaius walked home that evening, the weight of his decision grew heavier. He knew his life was about to change, but in which direction would it lead? Gaius had made up his mind. He would go to the emperor's event, regardless of the warning. The chance to prove himself was too great to ignore. But little did he know that this journey would not just be about earning the emperor's favor, it would also change the very path of his life. The first step to proving himself came in a place Gaius never expected, the gladiator training grounds. The day after receiving the invitation, Gaius was summoned by a man named Titus, a former gladiator who had become a trainer for young men like Gaius. Titus was a burly man with a gruff voice, and his presence was enough to command respect. "You've been chosen for a reason, Gaius," he said, leading him into the dusty arena, where other young men were already training. The training grounds were massive, filled with the sounds of swords clashing and shields being struck. Sweat poured down the faces of the fighters as they practiced their footwork and strikes. Gaius watched them with wide eyes, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had never wielded a weapon before, let alone fought in the gladiator games. "Your father's wealth won't save you here," Titus grinned, noticing Gaius's hesitation. "You'll learn what it truly means to fight for your life." At first, Gaius struggled. His arms grew tired, and his legs felt like they might give out from under him. The sword felt heavy in his hand, and he found it difficult to focus with so much noise and movement around him. Titus, seeing his struggle, pulled him aside. "Focus, Gaius. Strength isn't just about muscle. It's about focus and strategy. You must understand your opponent before you can defeat him. Be patient. Feel the rhythm of the fight." These words stuck with Gaius. Each day, he returned to the training grounds, learning how to move fluidly with his weapon and using his surroundings to his advantage. He practiced how to parry strikes, how to read an opponent's movements, and how to use his quickness instead of relying on sheer strength. But more than just fighting, Gaius began to learn about honor and sacrifice. Many of the gladiators he trained with were not there by choice. They were slaves, men who had been forced into the arena as a form of punishment or debt. Gaius grew close to one of the gladiators, a man named Decimus, who had once been a soldier before losing his freedom. Decimus shared his story with Gaius, explaining how he had been betrayed by his fellow soldiers and sold into slavery. "You think being a gladiator makes you strong," Decimus said one day as they rested after a long session, "but it takes more than strength to survive in this world. It takes heart. It takes knowing who you are." Gaius took those words to heart, understanding for the first time that strength in the arena was not just about physical power but about knowing one's purpose. He began to question his own life. What did he want to become? Was he destined to be a mere merchant, like his father, or did he have the heart to rise above the constraints of his birth and achieve greatness? Weeks passed, and Gaius became a skilled fighter, his body growing stronger and his movements more precise. He wasn't the strongest gladiator on the field, but he was quick and smart. His experience in the training ground soon earned him the respect of the other fighters. Even Titus began to notice a change in Gaius's attitude. The young boy who had entered the training grounds unsure of himself was now a focused and determined fighter. But Gaius still didn't know if he was ready for the ultimate test, the gladiator games. These were not just training bouts, but real fights to the death. Every day, young men entered the arena, fighting for their freedom or for glory. The thought of stepping into the arena filled Gaius with fear, but he knew that this was the next step toward proving himself to the emperor. The day before the games, Gaius was preparing himself mentally. The other gladiators were nervous, but Gaius kept his mind calm. He had learned from Decimus and Titus that fear was a tool, it could either paralyze him or make him stronger. He chose to let it fuel his focus, remembering everything he had learned in the training grounds. That night, as Gaius lay in his bed, he thought about his family. His father's expectations weighed heavily on him, and he wondered if his father would ever understand his desire to forge his own path. But he knew one thing for certain: the next day would change everything. Whether he won or lost, he would be different. The games were not just about survival, they were about finding his true self. The next morning, Gaius stood at the gates of the arena, his heart racing. The crowd outside was roaring, eager for the fight to begin. Gaius stepped forward, gripping his sword tightly. His mind was clear, his body prepared. He had come a long way from the quiet teenager in his father's home. Now, he was ready for whatever lay ahead. After the gladiator games, Gaius's life seemed to take an unexpected turn. He had proven his worth in the arena, but the emperor's invitation was still fresh in his mind. It was not just a chance for glory in the arena, it was an opportunity to get closer to the power that ran the empire, the Senate. But Gaius soon realized that the games were only a small part of the world he was now stepping into. He was about to learn that politics, power, and loyalty could be far more dangerous than anything he had faced in the gladiator pits. Gaius had been chosen to attend a Senate meeting, a rare honor for someone of his age and standing. As a young man who had proven himself in the arena, he was seen as a potential ally for the powerful senators. The emperor's advisor, a man named Senator Aulus, had taken notice of Gaius's bravery and invited him to observe the workings of the Senate. The invitation was a chance to see firsthand the wheels of power turn, but also to be drawn into the dangerous world of politics. The Senate was unlike anything Gaius had ever imagined. It was not the grand, majestic building he had pictured, rather, it was a place of constant whispers, tense discussions, and hidden agendas. The marble halls echoed with the sound of debates, but underneath the debates, there was a quiet, seething undercurrent of ambition. Senators argued fiercely over laws and policies, but Gaius quickly realized that their true battles were fought in the shadows, away from the public eye. Senator Aulus, the emperor's trusted advisor, took Gaius under his wing, showing him the ways of the Senate. Gaius, eager to learn and prove himself, listened carefully to Aulus's words. "Power is a game," Aulus said one evening, as they walked through the grand halls. "It is not won by strength, but by who you trust and who trusts you. Every man here is looking for an advantage. You must be careful, Gaius, for loyalty is a currency that can be spent too easily." At first, Gaius was captivated by Aulus's words. He saw how the senators wielded their influence, playing one another like pieces on a chessboard. But soon, he realized that there was a darkness to their games. Gaius had always believed in honor and truth, but the Senate was a place where such ideals were easily forgotten. It was not about what was right for Rome, it was about what was right for the individual's power. As Gaius continued to observe the Senate, he started to see the cracks in the empire. The emperor, while revered, was not as invincible as he seemed. Many senators secretly plotted to overthrow him, each with their own ambition for the throne. Gaius, now entangled in their world, was becoming part of something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. One evening, as Gaius left the Senate meeting, a familiar figure approached him. It was the same mysterious man who had warned him about the conspiracy at the emperor's court, the one who had appeared in the shadows weeks earlier. Gaius's heart skipped a beat. The man's eyes glowed with urgency as he spoke. "The time has come, Gaius," the man said, his voice barely a whisper. "The senators are planning something great, something that will change the course of Rome forever. You have been chosen for a reason. The emperor's reign is fragile, and the Senate plans to strike." Gaius felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected that something was amiss, but hearing it from the stranger confirmed his fears. The emperor was in danger, and those closest to him were the ones plotting his downfall. The man continued, "You must decide, Gaius. Do you stand with the emperor, or do you turn away? The Senate is not just a place of power, it is a place of betrayal, and you must choose where your loyalty lies." Gaius felt torn. The emperor had given him a chance, an opportunity to rise above his humble beginnings. But at the same time, he had witnessed the corruption and greed within the Senate. The political landscape was filled with ambition and treachery. Could he trust anyone in this world? As the days passed, Gaius's thoughts became consumed with the secret he had learned. He knew that the emperor's life was at risk, and that the fate of Rome could rest on his decision. Should he act on the information he had received and warn the emperor? Or should he stay silent, protecting his own future in the Senate, where his influence was growing? The weight of his decision was immense. Gaius had always dreamed of rising to greatness, but now he was faced with a moral dilemma that could cost him everything. Loyalty was a currency, as Aulus had said, but Gaius didn't know if he could trust the men who held it. He had learned that ambition could drive people to do terrible things. But could he betray the emperor, a man who had given him this chance, to save his own life and future? The tension grew as Gaius prepared for the Senate's next meeting. The conspiracy loomed, and he knew that the moment of truth was coming. He could feel the weight of the choices ahead. Rome's future was in the balance, and Gaius would have to decide which side he was on, whether to fight for honor or for survival. As Gaius walked toward the Senate building, he could feel the eyes of the city upon him. He had come a long way from the quiet streets of his childhood. The young boy who had dreamed of adventure and glory had now become a man caught in a web of politics, power, and betrayal. The path before him was uncertain, but one thing was clear: his decisions would shape not only his future but the future of Rome itself. The days following Gaius's encounter with the mysterious figure were filled with unease. The Senate had become more than just a place for politics, it was a battlefield, and Gaius felt like a pawn caught in the crossfire. He had witnessed firsthand the greed and treachery lurking in every corner, and the emperor's life seemed to hang by a thread. But it wasn't just the emperor's safety that troubled Gaius, it was his own path. The choice he had to make wasn't just about loyalty, it was about survival. One evening, as Gaius prepared to leave the Senate after yet another long day of secretive discussions and power plays, he was summoned by Senator Aulus. The man who had once guided him through the political landscape now seemed to be a shadow of his former self. His face was pale, his eyes dark with the weight of his own decisions. Gaius knew that Aulus was involved in something dangerous, but what he didn't know was how deep the senator's ties to the conspiracy ran. "Gaius," Aulus said, his voice low and strained, "you must understand that the Senate is not just a place for debates. It's a place where decisions are made that shape the future of Rome. Some of those decisions are not for the good of the people. They are made to ensure the survival of those in power." Gaius listened intently, unsure of where this conversation was headed. His trust in Aulus had been unwavering up until now, but something about the senator's tone made him nervous. It was as though Aulus was preparing to say something that would change everything. "Tomorrow," Aulus continued, "there will be a meeting, a final decision regarding the emperor's future. The plot against him is already in motion, and I am a part of it." Gaius's heart sank. He had known something was amiss, but hearing Aulus admit to being part of the conspiracy was a blow to his trust. His mind raced, torn between his loyalty to the emperor and his growing understanding of the treacherous world around him. "You must choose, Gaius," Aulus said, his voice softer now. "You have proven yourself in the arena, but now you must prove your worth in the world of men. The emperor is weak. The Senate, however, holds the power to shape Rome's future. You can join us and help secure the Senate's control over the empire. Together, we can bring stability to this land, even if it means sacrificing the emperor." Gaius felt his stomach turn. The emperor had given him a chance, he had trusted him, believed in him. But now, the same people who had brought him into the heart of Rome's power were asking him to betray that trust. It was a choice that seemed impossible. "But the emperor is not a tyrant," Gaius said, his voice shaking with the weight of his words. "He may not be perfect, but he is the ruler of this empire. How can I betray him?" Aulus's expression darkened. "You speak of loyalty, but loyalty in this world is a dangerous thing, Gaius. Loyalty to the wrong person can destroy you. Look around you. The empire is crumbling. The people are restless, the armies are divided, and the Senate is the only institution that can save Rome from collapse. We cannot afford to be weak." Gaius stood there, his mind spinning. He had always believed that honor was the highest virtue, but now he was learning that in Rome, honor was often a luxury few could afford. The betrayal of the emperor was no longer a matter of political strategy, it was a matter of survival. If Gaius wanted to secure his place in the world, he would have to make a decision that went against everything he had believed in. The next morning, as the Senate convened, Gaius felt like a man standing at the edge of a precipice. He had already made his choice: the lure of power, the promise of influence, and the advice of his mentor had led him down a path he could not turn away from. He had chosen to stand with the Senate. But as the senators gathered in the grand hall, Gaius's heart began to beat faster. He had been promised a position of power, but he had not anticipated the true cost of his decision. Senator Aulus, standing at the head of the chamber, gave a signal to the guards. A hush fell over the room as Aulus began to speak. "Gaius," he said, turning to the young man, "You have proven your loyalty to the Senate. And for that, we offer you a position of great power. The emperor will be no more, and the Senate will take control of Rome's future. But we need your assistance in this final step. We need you to be our messenger." Gaius's heart stopped. He had no choice but to obey. The Senate had already made their decision, and he was now a part of their scheme. He was to deliver the news of the emperor's downfall. But as he stepped forward to carry out the orders, a sudden thought struck him. What if he was wrong? What if the emperor wasn't the enemy, but the Senate was? Gaius had seen the emperor's vulnerability, yes, but he had also seen the emperor's vision for Rome, a vision of strength, unity, and prosperity. Was that truly worth sacrificing for the sake of power? Before Gaius could make a move, a loud bang echoed through the Senate chamber. The doors slammed open, and a group of soldiers stormed in. At the front was a figure Gaius had not expected to see, the emperor himself. The emperor's voice rang out across the chamber. "Senators, you have betrayed me. And now, you will pay the price." The room erupted into chaos. Guards and senators scrambled, but the emperor, determined and enraged, was in control. He had known about the plot all along. And now, the betrayal was coming to an end. The emperor had turned the tables, and Gaius was left standing in the middle of it all. Gaius stood at the gates of the arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of the crowd filled his ears, a roaring wave of noise that seemed to echo from the very stones beneath his feet. He had faced many challenges in his short life, but none as daunting as this. The moment had arrived, the gladiator games would begin, and Gaius was about to step into the arena for the most important fight of his life. The events of the past few days had left Gaius shaken. He had betrayed the emperor, choosing to side with the Senate, but now, with the emperor alive and in control, Gaius realized how dangerous his decision had been. The betrayal was no longer just a political maneuver, it was a personal failure, one that weighed heavily on his conscience. Yet, as he stood in the shadow of the arena, he knew that there was no turning back. His loyalty, his future, and even his honor were now bound to the choices he had made. The sun blazed down on the sand, the heat making the air shimmer. Gaius could see the other gladiators preparing for the fight, strong men, hardened by years of combat, their faces grim and determined. Among them stood Decimus, the gladiator who had become his friend. Gaius met his eyes, and the older man gave him a brief nod, acknowledging the bond they had formed during their time in training. Decimus had become more than just a fellow fighter, he had become a mentor, someone who had shown him the true meaning of survival in the arena. But this fight would be different. It wasn't just about winning or losing, it was about honor, redemption, and the cost of loyalty. As the gates of the arena opened, Gaius was thrust into the blinding light. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices blending into a cacophony of excitement. The stands were filled with spectators, senators, wealthy merchants, and common citizens alike, each one eager to see the bloodshed that the games would bring. The emperor sat high in his royal box, his eyes scanning the arena with an inscrutable expression. Gaius's opponent was a seasoned gladiator, a towering man named Marcus, known for his ruthless fighting style. He had fought in dozens of battles and had never lost a match. His reputation was legendary, and he was considered one of the best fighters in Rome. Gaius felt a surge of fear as he locked eyes with the giant, but he quickly pushed it aside. He had come too far to back down now. The signal was given, and the fight began. Gaius and Marcus circled each other, their swords gleaming in the sunlight. The crowd was silent, watching intently as the two gladiators prepared for their clash. Gaius's heart raced, but he focused on the lessons he had learned during his training, the rhythm of the fight, the strategy behind each move, and the importance of patience. He knew he couldn't rely on sheer strength alone. He had to be quick, precise, and smart. Marcus lunged forward with a powerful strike, but Gaius was ready. He dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the blade, and retaliated with a quick swipe of his own sword. The crowd gasped as the two men locked blades, their muscles straining with the force of the clash. Gaius's arms trembled under the pressure, but he held his ground, refusing to be overpowered. "Not bad for a young man," Marcus grunted, his voice filled with grudging respect. "But you'll need more than speed to defeat me." Gaius said nothing. He didn't need to speak. Every move, every strike, every decision in that arena was a testament to his resolve. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, he was fighting for his honor, for his future, and for the choices he had made. The battle raged on, the two gladiators locked in a deadly dance of strikes and parries. Gaius's body ached from the exertion, and sweat stung his eyes, but he pushed through the pain. He could feel the eyes of the Emperor upon him, watching, judging. Every step he took, every move he made, was a reflection of the man he had become. But then, in a moment of hesitation, Gaius made a mistake. Marcus seized the opportunity, swinging his sword in a deadly arc. Gaius barely managed to block the strike, but the force of the blow sent him stumbling backward. His sword flew from his hand, skittering across the sand. Gaius was unarmed, vulnerable, and in that moment, he knew he was at the mercy of his opponent. The crowd gasped in anticipation, waiting for Marcus to deliver the final blow. Gaius's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't panic. He had been trained for moments like this, moments when survival depended on more than just strength. His mind raced, calculating his next move. He reached down, grabbing a nearby spear that had been discarded in the dirt. With a swift motion, he hurled it at Marcus, catching him off guard. The spear struck the gladiator's shield, forcing him to stumble backward. Gaius took advantage of the opening, rushing forward and using his agility to disarm Marcus, knocking his sword from his hand. For a moment, everything was silent. The crowd waited in suspense, unsure of what would happen next. Gaius stood over Marcus, his sword raised, his breath coming in heavy gasps. The decision was now in his hands. He could strike and end the fight, securing his victory and his place in the arena. But as he looked down at Marcus, he saw something that stopped him, a glimpse of the man's eyes, filled with fear and desperation, just like his own. Gaius realized that victory in this fight would mean nothing if it came at the cost of his soul. Without hesitation, Gaius lowered his sword. He turned away from Marcus, offering him a chance to stand, a chance to walk away with his life. The Emperor's voice rang out across the arena. "What is this? You choose mercy over victory?" Gaius stood tall, his eyes focused on the Emperor's box. "Mercy is the greatest strength of all, Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady. "To kill without reason is not a victory. It is a loss of humanity." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his face unreadable. But the crowd, shocked by Gaius's decision, erupted into applause. For the first time in his life, Gaius felt something he had never felt before, respect. Not for his strength or his skill, but for his heart. As Gaius left the arena, his head held high, he knew that this fight had changed everything. He had faced the greatest challenge of his life, not in the clash of swords, but in the choice between honor and survival. And in that moment, he realized that true victory was not about winning the battle, it was about staying true to oneself, no matter the cost. The sun was setting over Rome as Gaius walked through the crowded streets. His victory in the gladiator arena had earned him respect, but it had also opened his eyes to a new reality, a reality he was no longer sure he was ready for. The Emperor's power had been challenged, but the way Gaius had chosen to handle his victory, by showing mercy, had sent ripples through the empire. As he walked, Gaius couldn't help but reflect on the choices that had led him here. He had been drawn into the world of the Senate, where betrayal and power ruled every decision. He had stood at the edge of moral destruction, forced to choose between loyalty to the Emperor and the seductive promises of the Senate. But now, after the battle in the arena, Gaius understood something he hadn't before. His future was not shaped by the choices of the powerful men around him, but by his own actions. The streets of Rome felt different to him now. They were not just the bustling roads he had walked as a child, filled with merchants, philosophers, and soldiers, they were the paths of a city on the brink of something monumental. Gaius could feel it in the air, the tension, the whispers of revolution, the unspoken understanding that change was coming. And he knew that whatever path he chose now, it would shape the future of Rome. As Gaius made his way back to the palace, he was met by the figure of Senator Aulus. The senator's face was drawn, his expression one of uncertainty. It had been weeks since their last conversation, and Gaius had not seen him since the emperor's return. Aulus had been part of the conspiracy, one of the key figures who had plotted against the emperor. But now, as Gaius stood before him, it was clear that the senator had come to realize the true cost of his ambition. "Gaius," Aulus said, his voice thick with regret, "I underestimated you. I thought I could use you, that you would be just another pawn in our game. But you've proven me wrong. You showed mercy in the arena, something I could never do. And in doing so, you've shown Rome what true leadership looks like." Gaius looked at the senator, his mind racing. He had been a part of the conspiracy, had chosen to side with the Senate over the emperor. But now, the emperor was in power once more, and Gaius found himself torn between the loyalty he had pledged to the emperor and the bitter knowledge that he had once been complicit in a plot to end his reign. "You may have made a choice in the arena, Gaius," Aulus continued, his tone quiet, "but your greatest challenge still lies ahead. The emperor's trust is not so easily won. You have shown mercy, but mercy will not save you from those who see weakness in it." Gaius didn't respond immediately. He understood what Aulus was saying. In a city like Rome, mercy was a rare commodity, one that could be seen as a weakness by those who sought power at any cost. But Gaius had learned something crucial in the arena: true strength didn't lie in domination or violence. It lay in making the hard decisions, in choosing to do what was right, even when the world around you screamed for blood. "I know what I have to do," Gaius said at last, his voice steady. "I will make things right, not just for myself, but for Rome. I won't let power corrupt me. I will lead with honor, not with fear." Aulus looked at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Perhaps there is hope for Rome after all. The following days were a blur of events. Gaius was summoned to meet with the emperor, who, despite the tumultuous political landscape, had been steadily rebuilding his power. The emperor's confidence was evident in the way he held himself, but there was something else in his eyes, an understanding that Gaius had a unique place in this new order. Gaius entered the emperor's chambers with his head held high, aware that his actions in the arena and his decision to show mercy had set him apart from the others. The emperor greeted him with a nod, his gaze sharp and calculating. "Gaius," the emperor said, his voice strong yet calm, "you have earned my respect, and more importantly, you have shown me that Rome's future is not about power for power's sake. It is about leadership that serves the people. You are the kind of man Rome needs, someone who understands the value of mercy, of honor." For the first time since he had arrived in Rome, Gaius felt a sense of peace. He had always dreamed of greatness, of rising above the ordinary to become someone who could change the world. But now, he understood that true greatness wasn't about fame or glory, it was about making the right choices, no matter the cost. The emperor leaned forward, his voice lowering. "I have a task for you, Gaius. Rome is on the brink of a new era, and I need men like you by my side. Will you stand with me, not for power, but for the future of our city?" Gaius's heart raced, but his answer was clear. "Yes, Your Majesty. I will stand with you, for Rome." And so, Gaius's journey had come full circle. From the quiet streets of his childhood to the blood-soaked sands of the gladiator arena, he had come to realize that his true purpose was not to gain power, but to serve something greater than himself. In the end, it wasn't his strength or his skill in the arena that made him a hero, it was his ability to choose honor over ambition, mercy over cruelty, and truth over deception. As Gaius left the emperor's chambers, he looked out over the city that had shaped him. Rome was a place of power, of danger, and of opportunity. But it was also a place of hope, a place where the future could be shaped by those who chose to do what was right, no matter the cost. And Gaius knew that, in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.